Okay, welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
My name's Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
Here we go, Josh.
So we got a lot that's happened in the last week and a half since we've recorded. You this past weekend started your most recent play. You had opening weekend. How did it go?
I would love to be clearly objective about these things, but I'm not. So I'm probably going to sound like a neurotic mess. I accept that a lot in life. Opening weekend is always strange. I don't think we've talked about this play yet on the podcast. I don't think that people know that I've been doing this play, and it's been going really well. And there's a lot of positive things that have happened, and they keep happening. But opening night is so weird because, you know, people come to review it. People from families come, friends come, and it's just this unnecessary amount of tension where it's almost like I wish that we could say it's opening night and then the following week tell all the reporters to come or whoever's going to come, and then that way it's the less pressure. But this most interesting thing happened. So opening night was Friday night, and I was nerve-wracked, as I traditionally am, and I couldn't get the better of it. I couldn't get on the other side of it. Even after my first line, even after I play 3 separate characters, and 2 of them are smaller in the first act, and then 1 larger one in the second act, and I just couldn't get over it. I could not get out of my head. There were some wonky things that happened. I've inverted lines. I have made up things that don't exist in anybody's script except for my brain, which I didn't know I was capable of doing. I knew I was capable of forgetting lines, and I knew I was capable of missing lines or missing words in lines. I didn't know I was capable of making something completely up that I never anticipated before. That happened. Okay, we recovered, no problem. Everybody in the cast thought it was a great show. The producers thought it was a great show. The directors thought it was a great show. It's being directed by 2 different people. And one reviewer for the local paper did not come because it was a rainy day and downtown Norfolk is a mess and he couldn't get in. So he came the following night, which actually was good because the pressure of opening night's off your back. And I didn't know if he was in the audience or not. And we have to take the stage from the side of the building where the actual box office is. So they have to shut that down earlier to have the cast stand there because we take the stage from that side. It's a very strange setup. It's cool, but it's strange. Well, I'm pacing back and forth in the hallway, and I turn the corner. Here comes the reviewer. He's running late. He's out of breath, and he's trying to get there. And I was like, what do I... And I turned around and just pretended I had to go to the bathroom, which I instantaneously had to go to the bathroom. And I thought to myself, when I was in the bathroom, I thought, okay, I have a choice here. I let that bother me, or I stand my ground and I do what I do, and I'll just absorb the light, and whatever comes out, you know what? I'm going to stand my ground. And it is single-handedly one of the best performances I feel I've ever done. I felt great about it. I was having a good time. I was enjoying it. Like, I was actually having fun. And there's some heavy moments in this play, and they kind of took off a little bit, but they didn't really soar, and I was okay with that. I have no idea what he's going to say. It's going to be interesting either way. Let's say he thought it sucked and thinks I sucked. It's going to be interesting to weigh that barometer against what I felt. You know, like, I felt great about it, but he thought it sucked. So it's going to be interesting to see what it's going to be like. I mean, you know, next week when the review comes out, call me back. But, you know, it's going to be interesting to see me feeling so good about it versus somebody not liking it, or the fact that I felt so good about it and I was right and he thought it was good too. I don't know. They haven't come out. We'll talk about it later. But so it was as always, it's an interesting proposition, standing in front of people, saying other people's words in the brightest light of you can imagine sometimes, and trying to tell a story. It's always perplexing to me. But I had a good time that Saturday night. And I thought you can see the audience. I have to speak directly to the audience again. And I need to stop being middle-aged dad bod talking to the audience guy. Got to stop it. I want to be in shape and be in a play where, you know, my age doesn't matter and I don't have to talk to the audience. But he seemed to respond to it. He smiled a couple times. He laughed a couple times. And it didn't bother me that he was in the audience. So I was just thrilled. I was like, okay. I mean, I'm not saying that's ever going to happen again. Mm-hmm. And probably next time I get reviewed, it's going to be worse because it's going to build up. But it was so nice to just relax and do it. I was a little nervous when I took the stage, but then it was gone. And I opened the second act with a monologue, just me.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, here it comes. This is when it's going to come. And I was like, you know what? I know what I want to do here. I know what
Mm-hmm.
my intention is. And it's the first time in my theater history that I actually played my intentions in my brain while I was actually working on stage.
Hmm.
So there's been an accomplishment.
So do you feel like you're kind of like taking charge of your performance as opposed to being passive about it? Or, I mean, do you feel like that's something that's changed over the last few performances you've done recently or throughout your career as an actor?
Well, I just keep thinking I'm going to feel like I'm getting better, and I don't feel that way. I'm
Mm.
still as insecure as I've ever been, and I'm still perplexed by it. They've been nothing but completely kind and generous, and the cast has been nothing but complimentary, genuine compliments. And I've had some magical moments in rehearsal that, for me, is going to get me a little bit. For me, that's what matters, and that's what I'll remember. Yes, it's going to hurt if he doesn't like the play or she doesn't like the play, the two reviewers that came. It's going to hurt that he didn't like what I did or he didn't like what we did. Yeah, sure, that's going to sting. But once you get past that, I've gotten bad reviews before. They stick, but you get past it. And the dead zone moments have really existed for me in this play. I mean, there's been a couple times that I've come out of it. I literally didn't know where I was. Like I literally was like, wait, what? And then something snapped me into my brain that I was on stage and rehearsing. And so I was like, I'll trade those moments for any good reviews ever. And there's been a couple of moments where I could literally feel the air being sucked out of the room by what was happening between me and another person. And she could feel it too. And I just turned to her afterwards and I was like, what? And she was like, wow. And so I'll take those moments. Sure, I want him to like it. And I want them to like it. I want to get good reviews so people will come see the play. But those moments there are probably why I pursue it to this day. So the answer to your question is, I don't know. I don't know. I was thinking I was in control and I was thinking I knew what I was doing. And then it all fell apart and then it came back and then it fell apart and then, and so tortured artist, dude.
But it sounds like those moments that you've felt even in the rehearsal, and you've only done one weekend. It sounds like those moments are moments that can also happen, in performances, and that's really the key. That's what you've talked about in the past, is that kind of connection with the people on stage with you, and also the connection with the people in the audience, and that thing that happens that is not something that is generic. It's not something that is just like rubber stamped, and it's something that is unique to the people who decided to, get the babysitters and drive down to the theater and, make the effort. That's what they're getting back from you and from the other performers there. And so, I mean, I think that's the amazing part about theater. We can still get that with movies, but it's not, I don't think it's necessarily as going to be as palpable as being in the same room as the people that are going through that. And that's probably why a lot of actors, a lot of successful actors still go back to theater, because they want to get a little bit of that feeling back, I would think too. But it's really cool that you're able to kind of do that right now. This weekend you did that, and next weekend you'll do that. That's so cool.
Yeah, it's a moment thing. And only in that moment at that time did that moment happen. And what's interesting and perplexing and complex and then nerve-wracking and mind-blowing is that you have these moments that you've solidified, that you've rehearsed, and they can soar, and then they drop. And they don't soar when you're in front of an audience. But then a simple act of handing somebody a napkin and somebody saying thank you back to you, and it's so genuine and so real that that you felt it, the other person felt it, and people are in the audience, they had to have felt it. Regardless of whether or not it's this big emotional thing, it's these genuine small moments. I'll give you an example, and it didn't happen to me. It happened to the woman playing the lead. She went into this scene, the lights come up, she's supposed to answer the phone. She answers the phone, she does her first few lines, and then the other character's supposed to come on and interrupt her phone call. And as she's hanging up the phone call, she starts to sneeze. The sneeze was just real human beings sneezing. And she sneezed once, and everybody just kind of went on. And she sneezed the second time. It was so cute because she was trying to not sneeze all over everything. She works in a doctor's office. It was really interesting how she kind of covered it. But actually had to be a human being about it, like a real human being about it. And the other young lady went, God bless you. And it was powerful because it was so genuine. And you would think that's silly, but it's what makes it worth it. So we're going to move on to a very emotional movie. So I will be like this the rest of the podcast.
Well, before we move on, I did want to bring up the fact that you are performing with the Generic Theater in Norfolk, and you're performing a play called Row, and it's going to be going on through September 15th. So yeah, you should definitely, if you're in the neighborhood, definitely look it up. And if you're not in the neighborhood, go there and go and see it. The tickets are very reasonably priced. So yeah, that's really awesome. So it's like Thursdays through Sundays, right? That's what your performance
Correct.
is? Okay.
It's a matinee on Sunday at 2:30 though. Everything else is 8:00 go. Yeah. Thank you for taking care of the technical stuff.
Yeah. You may not plug it, but I will plug it for you. So there you go. Okay. So yeah, you're right though. We are going to talk about a really emotional movie. And this is a film from writer Lulu Wing called The Farewell. And it's about, it's funny. We haven't done this in the recently, but I look on IMDb a lot. Obviously, I'm sure that you do too. But I looked at the description of this, and it's a Chinese family discovers their grandmother has only a short while left to live, and decide to keep her in the dark, scheduling a wedding together before she dies. But really, what it's about is it's about culture, and it's about the difference in culture, and it's about a Chinese couple who decides to move to the United States when their daughter is young, about 6 years old. And then the movie is from the point of view of their daughter, who's all grown up, is an artist, and is still kind of trying to figure out her way through life as an adult. And she finds out about her grandma, who essentially raised her from birth until she was 6 years old, that finds out that she's got a terminal cancer diagnosis, and her parents don't want her to go back, but she ends up going back with her well, at the same time as her parents, to visit her grandma, ostensibly for the last time. So, but the key part that they leave out in all of this is that they are purposefully not telling her that she has terminal cancer. And that's a cultural thing that has a precedent in Chinese culture, but does not have a precedent in American culture. And so the main character, played by Aquafina here, has to wrestle with that. I saw the trailer and I was interested in it, and I was like, I think we should, I think we should do this. And just the fact that Aquafina is the star of it, and it's pretty much like a drama, but it has humorous sections to it, but it's definitely more, leaning towards drama. And it's also based on a true story. The writer director, this kind of happened to her grandma. So, I mean, that interested me also. And then, the fact that you have like essentially a YouTube star as the star of this dramatic, semi-serious, dramatic movie made it even that much more interesting. And also it was released by A24, and the movies that they've come out with this year have been pretty awesome. And last year too, actually. Midsommar being one of them, which they just announced a director's cut for that. So, and immediately the moment that I heard about that, I was like, yeah, I'm going to go see it. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to see it for a third time in the theater. But yeah, I'm a glutton for punishment, I guess. But okay.
My eyes cannot make enough movement in my head to respond to that, because I have this feeling I'm going to want to see it again too. And
yeah. And it's 30 more minutes. Like what 30 minutes are we missing from this movie?
Why did they need to cut anything out? I mean, because of length?
Well,
it doesn't make any sense.
And that's what he said, because there were descriptions of that, and of, it's like, is this your final cut? And he's like, well, like they kept pushing me, and so I cut 30 more minutes out of it. But I could see a movie where there's 30. He said there was some sort of like assembly cut that was like 4 hours long, 3 hours and 40 something minutes or something. And he was like, I wouldn't put that on anybody to watch. But that was just a thing for him to kind of start whittling down. But this version that they're coming, it's actually a smart move, because it makes me think that the movie made enough money in the theaters that it's worth it for them to re-release it and at least try to get some more money out of a theatrical run. So it's a new strategy by A24. At least I think it's a new strategy by A24. I don't remember them releasing a director's cut movie of a director's cut version of a movie before the movie comes out on Blu-ray, like this. But it has precedent. I mean, obviously they did this recently with Endgame, so, and they'll, I'm sure Disney's going to do it with other movies too. But anyway, back to The Farewell and this film by Lulu Wing, who is, I hadn't really heard of her a little bit. She did a short film called The Touch. I think it's called The Touch or Touch. And it also had a lot to do with a culture, kind of like a difference in cultures. Touch. It's just called Touch, and it's a short film. And, kind of a difficult subject matter too. But this is technically her second feature-length film. She did one called Posthumous in 2014. But yeah, it's I was interested from the very beginning, and then I saw it a couple weeks ago, and then you said you just saw it today. Is that right?
Correct.
So it's really fresh in your mind. And for me, I kind of had like an initial reaction of like, luckily one of my grandmothers is still alive, and I was like, I need to talk to my grandma, because it really kind of helped me to understand a little bit of what someone in the later stage of their life would feel, especially towards their family, but specifically, individually, but then also how their relationships towards their family are changed and focused by their proximity to death. So yeah, I mean, that was one thing that I got out of this, and then also just the interesting difference between our American culture and the Chinese culture, and trying to figure out, like, my first question was, which one is right? Are you supposed to tell someone that they have a terminal illness and that this will directly affect this may directly affect how they want to live the rest of their life? Or do you not tell them that, and you essentially take on that burden yourself as a family or as a relative? What did you think about that?
Well, I think without giving spoilers away this early on, I think the last clip of the movie tells you the answer to that. And we'll get
Yeah.
to that later on. It tells you what the answer is. For me, it made me go, there's the answer right there. I mean, that's the answer.
And for me, I started, once I kind of got to the end of the movie, once again, we're not giving you spoilers right now, but once I got to the end of the movie, it kind of helped me to focus on a little bit more of like, less of like, which culture is correct, and more of like, are we spending enough energy on these relationships, as societies, like how do we frame family as an American society versus how the Chinese culture frames family? And I'm speaking in very generic terms, obviously, but it made me think about family, and and about the responsibilities of people within a family. So I got a lot out of the movie, and it's a very well shot movie, and I think that the thing that makes this movie more comedic, the thing that helps the comedy move along in this movie are the framing of the shots. And Lulu Wang uses a lot of wide angle lenses, especially once you get the family together and you have a lot of people in the frame and they're all busy doing things, not physically like moving their arms or anything, but like emoting their specific, whatever their specific emotion is supposed to be in that scene. Like, they're all like, you can just look around in a shot and see what each of the characters is going through. And there's very little dialogue in a lot of these scenes. A lot of times it's awkward, pregnant pauses and people not saying things that they want to say, which is why Steph saw the trailer and she was like, yeah, I'd probably want to see that. And then I was like, I don't know, because she does not like awkwardness, especially like if we're in a theater or something. Like, she might be fine to be like, a movie has an awkward scene, whether it's like a dialogue scene, or the perfect example is The Office. When a long time ago, when the original British Office came out on DVD, I rented it and I was like, this is amazing. And I sat her down and I was like, watch this first episode. And she was like, yeah, she's like, it makes me feel weird. I don't like it. And so I was like, okay, I get it. I understand. But this movie is like that whole, it's like The Office. I mean, in the awkwardness that you feel in a lot of these scenes. And so, yeah, I kind of steered her clear of that, and I went by myself, which was good because there were certain times when I was it was getting a little dusty in the room. So, so that's good.
Certain times, almost every moment. Here's what I find interesting about see, this is why I find talking to you about movies is so interesting to me, because your first question is not a question I was expecting to be answering in the first 15 minutes of the podcast. And your question is it a good idea for them to not tell their grandmother that she's terminally ill and dying in a couple of months? That has not been stated yet. It's like she's got 3 or 4 months, and the doctor's like, that's lucky if she's got that period of time. My thing is that I never had a problem with it one way or another, because everything is not about her. Let me see if I can put this right. What Aquafina's character, Billy's character, I believe that's how you pronounce it. Probably that's the American version of it. But and then her cousin, who's getting married, he's great. And then her father, and then her mother, and all of them, that's about their reaction to their grandmother dying and their reaction to why they think she should know. It's not about their grandmother and what the grandmother would want to know. And I guess you would have to know your family member, irregardless of your culture, although that does come into play, how they would react to a situation like this. Are you thinking that your mother or father or grandparents would shut down? Are you thinking that they would get sick automatically and die out of depression? Do you think that they would recover quicker, or become healthy? I guess you have to know your family member. And in order to know this family member, you would have to know that she was raised in this culture, and that culture is as important to her as anything else. It is an identifiable personality trait of her. And she very clearly states throughout the movie things that she thinks should happen. We are not going to do this because it will be an embarrassment to the family. We can't look like we're being cheap for this wedding, she says. We need lobster, not crab, because lobster is not cheap looking. Crab is cheap looking, although the crab was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Because I didn't realize it was going to come out like that. I thought it was like crab cakes or something. You know how Virginia, southeast of me. But I mean, it's a crab, and it's huge too. But so she makes it very clear, and Lulu Wang makes it very clear in her screenplay how the grandmother feels about who she is as somebody born and raised in this culture and in this country. So you have to take it from there, in my opinion. So the answer for me about your original question was, should they have told her? Should they not have told her? I think it depends on who she is as a person. You have to realize that your family member has a certain way of being, and you have to respect that. And I actually think they made the right choice. I really honestly didn't even think about that until you just brought it up. But I think they made the right choice because she makes it very clear. She's good with her granddaughter being an independent person, and that she's living on her own in New York in that crazy city and blah, blah, blah. But really, if she had her way, they would have stayed in China, and she would have raised her granddaughter as one of her own from that point on. And then the daughter or granddaughter would have learned all those cultures or customs and so forth and so on. And she's clearly okay with her granddaughter not being able to speak as fluent Mandarin as most people in the country. But at the same time, she should be proud because her granddaughter does speak Mandarin to her on the phone. And so there's this cross-cultural thing going on. So I think you have to know who your family member is and how you're answering a question for them, but you can probably answer questions for your family members based on knowing who they are and how they have raised you and how they've been around you when you were growing up. So yes, it's a cultural divide in the fact that in America, we would think we would want to tell our family member that they were dying, and so they can get all their affairs in order. And the screenplay is brilliant because it answers all of those possible questions that you might have of why you would not tell her and why you would tell her. Because she says, well, what if she wants to get her affairs in order? What affairs? The one aunt says, what affairs? What's not already in order? Obviously the house is paid for and inheritance is taken care of, and the grandmother has money, and she only lives with that guy because, he needs to live somewhere, and they need support, and you see that later on in the film in that beautiful little hot water scene. I love it. And you have these, and she gives her money later on in the film, so that she's financially secure without making it a big dramatic
she
narrative
has a cook
about that.
Yeah,
she has a
definitely
cook, and they
secure.
talk about nannies, yeah, they talk about nannies and they talk about how this is the fourth maid that they've had and all that other stuff. So they're doing fine. And it's a great way of developing those characters without hitting you over the head with it. So for me, I think they made the right decision. But I might see this film again in 6 months when it comes out and think something different. I don't know. For me, because of what happens at the very end of the film, I'm secure with saying they made the right decision.
Mm. Yeah, well, I'm gonna disagree with you about that one, but we're gonna have to talk about spoilers to really get into it. Let's talk about the performances real quick before we get into some like really nitty gritty stuff. So first of all, I listened to an interview with Lulu Wang, and when initially someone, I don't know if it was the casting director, who came to her and said, Aquafina read the script and is interested in playing the main character, Billy, and Lulu Wing was like, do you mean the girl on YouTube who sang the song My Vag? That's the one you want to be the emotional center of this film?" And they're like, just hear me out. And so they did some auditions. They did some auditions
Screen
and
tests.
yeah, and screen tests, and she Aquafina won her over. And I think that having a like someone who maybe a specifically only a dramatic actor, some of the interactions may fall flat. But what the big thing I wanted to talk to you about was the way that she's able to present herself to other people as like it's like she's not pouting physically, but she's like trying to be devoid of emotion, but everyone sees that she's emotionally affected, and that seems to me to be something that would be very subtle. It could come off as pouting, which would be something that's a selfish emotion, and it's not. I mean, it's not like she's high or something and just like whatever tripping out on mushrooms or something. It's not something where she's like not in the room with them emotionally, but it's somewhere where she's like emotionally unavailable, but also trying to hold up some front of normalcy. And I don't know, she spends, it seems like, at least a good half of the movie like that, and when she's interacting with her grandma. And it was kind of like, I would not have thought that she would have been able to that would have worked, but it seems like it worked.
I think she's going to be nominated for the Oscar, and I think she could be a front runner, and I think she could win it. And I got the
What?
exact same. Yes, I think that I got the. No, I don't think. I know I got the exact emotional resonance when I was watching this movie that I got when I was watching Olivia Colman in The Favorite. There is something spectacular about Aquafina's performance. It's just pitch perfect. I'm going to go ahead and say it right now. Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay, Best Actress, and probably Best Supporting Actress if the Academy is smart and listens to me, for the grandmother, who I'm not sure how to
Nominations.
say her name. Yes, nominations. Can you say the?
Shujin Zhao.
Yeah, I thought it was that, but I was afraid because I don't want to. I'm going to have to learn these people's names because they will be nominated, and I want to be respectful of how you pronounce something. And it usually takes me a day or two after the nominations to practice it. And, words on page, man, just give me a couple days to rehearse it and I'm good. But if the Academy is what I think they are at its core, and this is a whole nother discussion, they recognize films like this. And it is pitch perfect, this movie for me. It's going to end up being one of my favorites of the year. It could end up being my favorite of the year. That said, I am very well aware I'm a sucker for an emotional drama about people who care about family members who might be dying, terms of endearment, so forth and so on. So I'm aware of who I am as a person, and I also am aware of how I am in tuned and sensitive to that vibration. And I've just come off a very, very emotional ride myself. So that might have a little bit to do with it.
Mm.
What's interesting about being in a play at the same time as seeing a movie like this, I have a pretty emotional scene in the play, and it was going somewhere at one point, and it stopped going there at a certain point, and it only went halfway there for opening night and the night that the reviewer came. And I was okay with that because you got to fly with what happens. But I think I did it so much and I kind of blocked myself up about it. And I think this movie has re-released that feeling of it's okay to be an emotional person and just be a wet, sobbing mess throughout a film, because that's exactly what I was. And it was nice because I almost thought, oh no, I've done it so much that I'm never going to cry in front of people again. And I'm never going to cry at a movie again. That's a gift. Give it back. I want it back. And this movie proves that that is gone nowhere, because it is right there for me for this. So as for what she does in Aquafina and what you're talking about, what's interesting about it is in the script, when she first walks into the house and they see her, and you see the mother and the father like, we told you not to come, and everybody else happy to be there, and she seems happy and she seems like she's going to pull it off. The grandmother immediately knows something's wrong, and she even says something. I don't think it's in that scene, but it's in another scene where she says, look at this little sad face. What are you so sad about? And up to that point, I think the audience members think that Aquafina, Billy, is pulling it off. So it probably just came natural to her, the actress Aquafina, because I don't know how you would play that. I don't know how you would figure out what your intention would be, because you're trying to cover something up, but you're still trying to act a certain way. And then, of course, luckily, she has the cousin who's getting married, who is an emotional wreck and is not hiding it at all. So you get that as an audience member, you get that release from a character who's just can't handle it, just cannot handle it. So for me, it's a really, really poignant performance, because you get those layers. First of all, it's nice to see that this movie's about a relationship between a grandmother and a granddaughter. You don't see that often. You just don't see that often. And probably people could tweet me about how this is that movie and this is that movie, and they're going to come up with 101 examples of it. For me, it felt fresh that you see a grandmother and a granddaughter on a telephone, because that's the opening sequence, with Billy walking down the street, talking to her grandmother. Yes, lying to her here and there, but that's also brilliant screenwriting, because now she has to lie about something that's like huge. So she's pretty good about leaving certain things out, adding things in, and not letting her know about other things, and rent, and this foundation that she's, or fellowship.
Fellowship.
Yeah, fellowship. What I say, foundation. So I don't know how you play that. And actually, to me, somebody who has a comedic background, or has the whole YouTube thing, when you're not expecting a person to be able to fulfill something, that's the person I would be interested in. So, in a way, it's almost like the casting directors deserves an Oscar nomination too, because like, give her a chance, give her a chance. And it seems to be that these people who are able to make other people laugh always have this inner core of sensitivity that just comes out when they do these dramatic roles. Robin Williams, of course, is the first person to come to mind. So I don't know how you would go about playing that, because you do need to see on her face that she's perplexed by it and she's saddened by it. But at the same time, she needed to be there. So she's going to play the game because that's what her parents are asking her to do. It's a complex role. And I honestly and truthfully think that when it's broken down and pulled apart, and I looked at a lot of the reviews, and I never do that, they talk about how spectacular she is, but they don't really break it down. And this movie would not work if the character of Billy didn't work. It just wouldn't. Same with the grandmother, Nene. It just would not work if those two actresses weren't on point. And Aquafina has a great emotional moment, but it's all those little subtleties that I find so interesting. The way that she's watching them eat and she's trying to eat at the same time, the way that she's kind of going with the flow, the way she runs to the hospital in the middle of the wedding. All of those things seem like very easy things to do to people who have never tried the craft. But for me, it's the most perplexing parts of it, because how do you be genuine and honest in something like running down the street? It makes sense to me on some level, but I also understand how somebody would think that that was a simple thing to do, but it's not a simple thing to do. To recreate genuine moments of just being in a dinner and drinking and eating, it's kind of hard to do, because you all of a sudden become self-conscious about the fact that you're eating, and you're like, how do I eat normally? What? Wait, napkin? Wait, and then you have to speak, and it just gets complex. So I want to ask you a question. Why were you so surprised when I said I thought she was going to be the front runner for the Oscar for this? And this movie's going to be the front runner too, if they get it right.
Well, I think that they have the ability to do that. I think that A24 is definitely I mean, getting better about. I think that there's a difference between a film and an Oscar campaign, and I think that there may be other movies that are gonna come out that may be more geared towards the Oscars, but that's a once again, Mr. Cynical. That's a cynical thing to say and a cynical position to have. But I think that I mean, yeah, the movie does check a few boxes, but yeah, I'm hopeful for this movie, and I'm hopeful for movies like this to get recognized. And I think the Oscars are a perfect way for someone to come across this movie, because if you see, I mean, there's multiple clips from this movie that you could play during the Oscars that would get somebody to at least pay attention, focus in and seek this out if it hasn't come across their radar throughout the past year. So yeah, I'm excited that you think that's the case, because you're very good at predicting these types of things, and that does give it a lot of credence. But I'm also cautious about embracing that, because I just feel like this I feel like this movie's too good to be recognized in all of those ways. That we've seen other movies that have come out that have had amazing performances that are, like I'm just thinking back on like Brian Tyree Henry in If Beale Street Could Talk. Like his like little bitty, performance in there, I thought was amazing. But like did that movie get nominated at all? I don't know. Did
Screenplay, and then Regina King won.
Screenplay? Regina King won. Yeah, that's true. Okay, good. Okay,
And
see, I'm
she
horrible
should
at
have, and that's
remembering
the
that stuff.
nomination that should have happened, and that's the win that should have happened. So it is a possibility.
You're right.
Okay, so I'm going to be an asshole and remind you that you very clearly stated that Yorgos Lanthimos would probably never be nominated for an Oscar and or any of his projects. And
That's true.
that's kind of not true. And no, it's not true. And then I think you were a little blown away when I said that Olivia Colman would be nominated for the Oscar for The Favorite. And you were like, really? And I was like, yeah, you saw that rabbit scene. I mean, that rabbit scene is something that sticks out. And these movies vibrate in a certain way that I get a feeling, and I could be completely wrong, and I've been wrong in the past, but there is no way that a movie vibrates like this movie, The Farewell, and people don't recognize it. And people, regardless, and I get what you're saying about Oscar campaign and all that other stuff. I will remind you that Monique did no campaigning for the Oscar and actually ruffled a ton of feathers and has not worked since because of ruffling a ton of feathers, because she refused to do promotion because she wasn't getting, don't get me wrong, I don't know the exact things about that, but it has something to do with salary and all that other stuff. But she ended up winning the Oscar anyway for Precious. So these things can happen irregardless of the machine that we know as the Academy. And I think I understand exactly what you're saying. And I don't necessarily think that it's cynical, although you are cynical, a lot. And that's okay. That's a healthy way to be. Your perspective is not skewed because your cynicism, your vision or your attitude towards seeing something is actually open-minded, more so because you are cynical about it. And you are willing to go, oh yeah, I was walking into this with cynicism in my heart, but I'm glad I was shown something differently. I
Yeah.
understand the machinacea that is machinacea, whatever the word is, that is the Academy. I get all that, but these films have a way of sneaking in and not necessarily surprising everybody, but surprising everybody. And then when the person wins, you go, of course they should have won. Of course Olivia Colman should have won. Of course she should have. Glenn Close, we love you, but in retrospect, people are like, oh yeah, that was the performance of the year. So once again, I will state that it's not the end all be all to a movie being recognized, but there's something about a movie like this. And there's a bunch of glass ceilings that could be broken. There's a bunch of things that could happen to people's careers because they're nominated. Lulu Wang being the primary one, Aquafina being another one. But it's almost like a movie like this cannot be ignored. And when it is ignored, it causes a big stir to the point where something 10 years from now down the line that is as similar to this, maybe not as in storyline, but as in impact and feeling and emotion and passion that this movie gives off, The Farewell gives off, that it ends up winning everything because it's about time. And it is about time for a film like this. And it has nothing to do with the Chinese culture or the American culture versus the Chinese culture, or somebody who is from China being nominated for the Oscar. That would be all great. Glass ceilings broken, blah, blah, blah. Screenwriter. But don't be surprised if this screenplay catches fire, because there is something spectacular about these moments that I don't know if people are really registering immediately. The bird in the window. It dawned on me when I was from The Farewell. It dawned on me as I was driving home that happens twice in the movie, once in America, once in China. And I thought, well, what was the director, the screenwriter trying to tell us? And it dawned on me that no matter what you plan for, no matter what you tell yourself, no matter what you tell your family member, no matter how you make up a decision about something as big as telling your grandmother she might only have 3 months to live, life is always going to give you something unexpected at the last moment. And it's not going to be how you think it should play out. And it's going to be perplexing and it's going to be complex, and you'll have to deal with it because that's the way that life works. So she walks into Billy, the lead character, Aquafina, walks into her apartment early on in the film, and she hears something that definitely sounds like somebody's breaking in, after her grandmother, of course, says, I hate you being in that city. It's unsafe and blah, blah, blah. She immediately reacts as if somebody has broken into her apartment. And then the most interesting thing in the scene happens, where you find out it's a bird that's gotten into her apartment, but the windows are not open. And in a very subtle way, Billy walks over to the window, opens the window and goes, how did you get in here? It's life putting something in front of you you're not expecting, but you have to deal with anyway. And it's never going to be explained why it's in front of you. And it's never going to be explained how you're going to figure it out, but you have to figure it out because it's in front of you, because that's the way this perplexing life works. And then it happens again in China, and she reacts differently to it. She reacts as if, yep, this has happened to me before. How do I react to it? The window's not open. How did you get in here? It's not this metaphysical moment. It's not this spiritual moment. It's not this mystical thing that's supposed to be explained. It's a bird in a room. And it's, for me, it translated into, she has made progress as a human being from the time the movie opens to the time you see that scene. And that's the scene, I think, right before the wedding, where she's just like, yep, okay, so I have to deal with this again. It's never explained. It's never talked about. She doesn't do some big long ass monologue about why the bird's in her room, which is traditionally what a screenplay would do. It's just something she has to deal with. To me, for somebody who has read a lot of theater scripts, those moments stick out where you go, I can't wait to see them do this on stage. I'm not talking about a bird in a window and all that other stuff. I'm just talking about moments like this. And when you read these screenplays and you read these scripts, these are the moments that you go, the right director will get this moment correct, and it will resonate in a way that other moments that are much more in your face in this movie, it will resonate in a different way. So for me, that's the type of thing that makes this screenplay so interesting, and it just happens. And most people who are traditionally used to just going to movies to eat popcorn and have a Friday night, and I love all that, I have no problem with that, would be like, what the hell is the deal with that bird? And for me, the fact that that moment is in the movie, those moments, those two moments are in the movies, makes once you've figured out where you stand on this issue, if you will, like you posed the question when we first started the podcast, then these small moments start to happen. You think, well, what would you do there? What would you do there? When those test results come out, what would you do there? What would you do there? To not sit back and think, what was the deal with that bird? And try to figure out where your imagination and your heart goes with that. To me, that's what makes a spectacular screenplay. So I'm not going to be surprised if all of these people who love movies, who vote for the Oscars, if they're not blown away by something like that and they miss it, so be it. But I can't see it happening. It's just great.
Well, I did want to get into spoilers specifically, because I did want to talk about the end of the movie, and I want to talk about kind of my opinion, I guess, on how the family dealt with it. So if you haven't seen the movie and you really don't want to be spoiled about anything in the end of the movie, then I guess go through the movie and then you can finish listening to this later. Okay, so spoilers from now on for the farewell. I feel like because of the line about halfway in the movie when she finds out that like her aunt tells her Billy's aunt tells her that her grandma Nene I think it's Nai. Is it Nai?
I know somebody's nickname was Nene, so that's what I hear in my head. So that's probably why I pronounce it. But
Okay.
all bets are off for me.
Okay. Anyway, well,
Well, Mandarin is such a clipped language that I can't hear it fast enough. So I can't,
mm,
and my ear is not as good as yours. So
yeah.
Nine could be right. It just clips
It's
very
been a while for
quickly
me,
that,
so I'm not sure. Yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, her grandma, Billy's grandma, has done this exact thing with someone else in her family. And so she's been on the other side. She's been on the side that the aunt is on right now, having to cover up all of these test results, having to deal with all of this stuff in the background and protecting Billy's grandma from this information. So Billy's grandma's been on the other side. Nina's been on the other side of this. So that tells me that she probably understands what's happening and she's able to internalize her situation without her family telling her that, without, even though her family is preventing her from seeing the test results and the prognosis and her expected her life expectancy. So that puts a whole nother spin on this movie for me, in that you're seeing someone who is embracing her culture and understanding what the culture is doing, but not also not being able to share in her specific emotions, or even present those emotions genuinely to her family, because her family is on the other side of that, trying to hold back their emotions for her sake. So it seems like a very, I mean, and I'm obviously looking at this from an American standpoint as opposed to from a Chinese standpoint, but from an American standpoint, I see two groups. I see the grandma and the grandma's family, and they're not living a lie. That's a bad way of saying, because that has a negative, specifically negative connotation. They each know what the other person knows, and they're still living like they don't know what the other person knows. So we assume that the family assumes that she doesn't know, and she assumes that the family does know, but she's trying to live like she doesn't know. So that is a lot of complication that, me being, an engineer and being someone who's, specific and, very interested in efficiency and just like cut to the chase, it seems like a lot of action for something that could, like, you could focus your energy on something else, whether it doesn't even necessarily need to be like, you have 3 months to live, you need to go bungee jumping and, eat a bunch of cheeseburgers. Like, it's not that. It's you have 3 months to live. Like, let's spend this time together. I feel like there's opportunities that are being missed because they are living in this scenario that forces each of them to refuse reality.
Okay, but that's how you feel about it. That's how you feel about it. So if you are a grandfather and your grandchildren and your children are keeping this from you, as Josh Knapp in North Carolina in America, you would want to know. That's your response to it,
Yeah.
not what is best for her. And because she does and has done this before to somebody else, and isn't it her husband that she does it to?
Yeah.
Their grandfather? Oh, by the way, in the gravesite scene, did you notice, and you might not have, and it's probably been a while for you, did you notice when they're all bowing 1, 2, 3,
Yeah.
that her and Aquafina are completely in sync and the rest of them are all doing their own bow?
They're
But
behind.
every single time that they bow 1, 2, 3, oh my God, I started crying over that moment. I thought that was beautiful. That's so structurally sound as a directorial choice, because her and Aquafina are in sync the whole entire movie. So for me, we've talked about this already in the beginning of the podcast. It's not about what my needs would be. It would be what I would think my grandmother's needs would be. And since she has done this before and she's been on both sides of it, and I am still asking myself whether or not she really knows if she's as sick as she is, because this is why this actress deserves an Oscar nomination. Forget about the last scene where they say goodbye. That's ridiculous. And she's waving and she almost passes out and her sister has to come and grab her. It's so beautiful, but that's obvious. It's the scene when she's in the hospital and she's getting the test done and she's sitting behind the curtain and she starts coughing. And there's a moment where she's coughing and it's unusual coughing. It's not your normal, I've got a sickness or I've smoked too much coughing. It's a weird coughing. And there's a moment where the actress registers as the character, something's not right here. Like there's something not right. So through that scene, I am indicated that the screenwriter wants you to believe that the grandmother does know that she's as sick as everybody says she isn't. So back to your original thought, I get what you're saying. But what moment didn't they have? Because she didn't know that what moment didn't they have? They got a great time when they do the little dance at the table for the weddings. Fantastic.
Yeah. Her cousin just had to get married to someone he didn't want to get married to. That's all. No big deal.
That's a whole nother subject. That's different though, because that is about personal choice when you come to believing what you think your family would choose to do and what you should do based on what your family wants you to do. That's a whole nother subject. That is not completely directly, it is, but it's not directly involved with whether or not you should tell the grandmother or not. Yes, it's a big thing to have a big party just because and make up an excuse to have a party just because. But I keep asking myself, what would the grandmother do?
Well, but the grandmother's in on it. Like she's in on it because she's like, they don't even know how to like stand next to each other. She's like, it makes me wonder what they do when they're alone. She's kind of like, she's also registering that. She's like, they don't even seem like they like each other that much. And it's because he's really sad because of his grandma's going to die soon, he thinks. And it's also, they've only known each other for whatever, 3 months.
Okay. Well, let's look. Even the bride is good. She's good too. My God,
she's really
so
good.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Oh my God, she's so sweet. I wanted to just hold on to her and be like, dude, I got you. Like, I'm gonna just hold on. You can let your legs go because it looks like you want to pass out this whole entire. Oh, I got you. I felt deep sympathy for her. And ask yourself this though: what would you do if you told your grandmother and all of a sudden she was like sickly and she spent the last 3 months in a hospital throwing up and trying to get chemo and all that other stuff, and all she wanted to do was celebrate life, and then she turns to you and says, I did this for your grandmother or your grandfather. It would have been nice maybe to have thought about that choice and not told me, and then we could have a big party and we could act like a family reunion. And what if you didn't do that? I kept posing that question to myself. What if Aquafina didn't come? So for me, all of the moments that you're saying that might go missing because you're not telling somebody that they're dying, actually, it's very beautiful that this culture is represented to show you that they're living their life regardless. They eat all the time, by the way. And they're all in really great shape. Jealous. And they're eating really great food all the time. And that scene when they're out to dinner for the rehearsal dinner and the tables rotating with all the food.
It's going the whole time.
So great.
Yeah, I thought the camera was on a dolly, but then I realized that it's just it's constantly moving. All the food's constantly moving. It's great.
Most sushi bars are like that, where you have a rotating thing where you can just pull and a certain color means it's a certain price and that kind of stuff. After a while, you stop considering and you just want what you see, which is really a great like business practice. And then you get the bill and you're like, yep. I knew that stuff was green for a reason, tagged green or tagged red or whatever it is. Anyway, so the question becomes, if you spend the last 3 months focused on your grandmother dying, is that going to help you live in the moments that you have had? The secret is only kept because they want to keep it. And if they want to spend their last 3 months with their grandmother or this wedding event with their grandmother, worried and sick to their stomach that their grandmother's dying and that they're not going to get the moments, they're not getting the moments anyway. So
I get that. But what I'm saying is that like, just because you tell someone that their prognosis is they have 3 years to live or 3 months to live, doesn't necessarily mean that they have to do chemo or that they have to, stay in a bed for the quote unquote rest of their life for the next 3 months. But what it does mean is that everyone's on the same page. There's not this hidden agenda to different things, and there's it's openness and it's transparency and it's love. Like I see that as love because it's not, it's one of those things. I guess for me, I also have a kind of somewhat of an issue of somebody saying like, we know what's better for you than you do. And that to me is, see, the only thing that makes this better than that, the only thing that makes this a little bit allows me to give it a little bit more of a pass is that it's a cultural standard in this particular Chinese culture. I don't know if it's particular class or what, but in that particular Chinese culture, that is a cultural standard. But the problem with it being a cultural standard is that you can be on both sides of it. It's like, I don't know. It's something that's like a magic trick, where if a magician does a magic trick for you and it's a magic trick that he showed you how he did it, it doesn't have that appeal because you knew he just showed you exactly how he did it. So what's the point in him doing it? That's kind of what I felt like by the end of this movie, especially at the last scene when Aquafina's saying goodbye to her, when Billy's saying goodbye to her grandma, because it is you can feel that it was so important for her to go downstairs, like to not say goodbye at the door. Like she wanted to see her grandchild for as long as possible, and she wanted to be able to internalize that and understand that, and I think she realized, this is my view of it, but I think that she realized that could have been the last time that she saw her grandchild, and that was the emotion that she was showing on screen, and the only way that would make sense, or the only way that made sense to me in the narrative of the film, is if she knew that she had cancer and had such a dire prognosis. I mean, the fact that she's still alive 60 years later, that the real grandma is still alive 6 years later, is amazing, and that's great, and that's to be celebrated. But it is not a reason for them to have done this.
Sure, it is
in this movie.
Absolutely,
no.
It is. Because she ends up living for 6 years later because she doesn't spend the time like being a cancer patient. Okay, she doesn't spend the time. Okay, you have to understand that for you personally, that's how you feel. So what if you told the grandmother, what if you told her and she turned to you and said, I didn't tell your grandfather. Why would you tell me? I wish you hadn't told me. Now, that's not something that's explored too deeply in the movie. I don't even think the question is posed, but it is a good question. No. What if you tell her and she turns and she says, I am a 80-some-year-old Chinese woman who's lived in this country my whole life, and I did this for another human being because I thought it was the right choice to do because culturally that's what we do, and now you've gone against that. And now I'm going to be miserable for 3 months, and I'm going to die miserably, maybe not because I'm dying of cancer and not because it's the last 3 months of my life, but maybe because you did the opposite of what everything in my life has indicated that you should do. So that comes back to the question of, I think that we could not possibly know what we would do in that situation until we were in that situation. And I think Aquafina's character Billy has a natural American reaction to it. And I think that sometimes we have to take ourselves out of our cultural biases and say, we don't know what we would do. We don't know what we would do if we had cancer and we had to tell our family members. We don't know. People are when they get older, they are very prideful and they don't even want to admit that they scraped their elbow because that means that they lost their balance and ran into the wall. So instead of doing that, they just bleed all over the place until you see it. And you go, what's wrong with your elbow? Oh, well, I cut it open. How'd you cut it open? It doesn't matter how you cut it open. It matters that they're hurt and they need your help. And they didn't want to tell you because they're embarrassed that they're now 83 years old and can't function like they used to. And they used to raise you doing that. Now, why does that sound so specific? Because that exact same thing happened to me with my father. He's very proud. And I have to every once in a while say to him, you got to let me know because it could get infected. It could go bad. But I also have to take the moment to go, What would it be like to be the father of somebody for 50, 60 years? And then that person mature and grow up and have to come take care of me. What would that be like? I can't imagine it. I can't imagine the amount of embarrassment it must come with having to rely on your middle-aged son to make sure you can go to the bathroom. My dad's totally cool. I'm just using that as an example. He's actually does really well, but he is not feeble by any stretch of the imagination. He's very independent and very proud of that. But when he has to realize he can't be, it must be really hard. So instead of talking to him about how the tides have turned and now I'm helping you and it does no good, you have to figure out a different way to say, hey, don't run into the wall. And if you do, let me know. So you have to figure out a different way to do that. And sometimes it's not even specifically talking about that thing because that specific thing makes a person feel inadequate. So you have to find a different language. And I just think they culturally found a different language. So for me, I mean, I guess we see two different sides of it. That's why this podcast is interesting. But
well, yeah, I think that's why this interplay is interesting, and we're kind of representing the two cultures in that way. But for me, I see most of the movie is not on the grandma. Most of the movie is on the family and how this decision has affected the family. And I see all of the pain and all of the emotion and all of the anguish that the family is going through to preserve this tradition and this decision that they've made together. And I see all of that pain, and I see another possibility where that pain wasn't necessary if they would have been honest with their grandma. And I think, looking at it from the grandma's point of view, even though she did this for her husband in the past, it makes me think that the grandma may have, I know that she does not want her family to suffer emotionally. And I know that she doesn't want her family to go through the pains that they're going through. And I would think especially if it's related to her. And the thing the way that I rationalize that is that she had both of her sons leave the country. She has essentially become, she's the aunt of, well, her sister's daughter who's there all the time or is able to facilitate any kind of issues that she has that Nai's sister can't handle. So really, her children, somebody could say, especially somebody who is Chinese and who's very traditional and who's very specific about, like, they could say, your sons abandoned you, your family abandoned you. One went to Japan to and then had a family, and then one went to the United States and had a family. And she doesn't feel that way. She's happy for them, and she's excited about the things that they're doing and about the things that their families are doing and that her grandchildren are doing. So I see that, and I see someone who's essentially broken away from, or at least emotionally is broken away from, what could be considered, very specific Chinese tradition of, like, your family needs to be here all the time. They cannot leave. And she's broken away from that in that she's not holding that against her family. And, now her family is kind of like forming back together in this instance in a charade of a wedding. And they're doing it all for her, but in effect, it's hurting them immensely. And I would think that would be the last thing that she would want for them. But ultimately, it would be a really boring movie if in the first 5 minutes she finds out she has cancer and they tell her she has cancer. So, I mean, I get it. I understand that.
It's a really good perspective that you have. And you're right. I wasn't really thinking about that. Like, she wouldn't want them to suffer. But let me ask you this. What if they do tell her? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think any one of the characters would act any differently? So they decide to tell her. So they decide to have a family reunion because this is going to be the last time everybody's in the room together. You don't think the cousin's going to get drunk? You don't think Aquafina is going to be all over her and emotional? You don't think the two sons who put in devastating performances,
amazing,
the uncle and his speech is ridiculous. Oh my
gosh. It went on way too long, which means it went on the right amount of time. But
and then she does that beautiful thing. Lulu Wang does that beautiful thing where she does that wide shot and just holds the camera there and no one says anything.
The first half of his speech is a close-up. So we don't get, like, it's just us and him. And then when she goes wide like that, you understand that like this guy is bearing his soul to everyone and he doesn't mean to. Like he can't.
And not a word is spoken in that wide shot.
Ugh.
Yeah, he almost gives he lets the cat out of the bag a little bit.
Sure.
So, but the question does become, let's say they tell her and they decide to have a family reunion to have their last moments with their grandmother, their mother, and so forth and so on. And everybody comes in from where they come in, and Awkwafina decides, even though they need her to stay away because she's too emotional and your grandmother's already upset and blah, 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 she comes anyway. It would play out exactly the same way because the nephew would be like, yeah, I'm getting married to have this fake wedding to
so you can see a wedding before you go. Yeah. I can see that.
And then he's at that family reunion. He's not going to act any differently. He's still going to get way too drunk, be awkward, not smile in the family picture. And she's going to be like, just because I'm dying doesn't mean you can't smile. Just because I'm dying doesn't mean you should get drunk enough. Oh, no, that's okay. Blah, blah, blah. My two sons are in the same room together. They came together. It would be the exact same movie. What's interesting to me is that we can't culturally completely grasp what that meant to people who were raised in a different country with a different idea of what is respect for their parents or their grandparents, because it's the brothers who make this decision. Yeah. And it's very clear that, and the mother, oh my God, Awkwafina's mother.
Yeah. That's Diana Lynn.
Oh gosh. That's acting, man, because the whole movie, you think she's just this cold-blooded woman who's just traditionally going to do this. And don't you tell me I didn't feel these emotions, but I kept them secret to make sure that, you know, your grandfather was doing well, her father, blah, 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 blah. And she does that whole thing. And then that cab ride to the airport. Oh, It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. And I actually think you could have made two choices as a director there. You could have had Awkwafina reach out and let her mother know she sees her having this emotional moment. Or you can let the character do what would come naturally, which would be to look up and say, oh, she is emotionally having a moment. Let me go back to myself, because out of respect for who I know my mother is, she would not want me to pull out this moment. She made that very clear when she was in the hotel telling me about how she was staying non-emotional because. And that's what makes this a strong culture. And that's what makes this a strong choice. So you could have very easily, it would have made it even more melodramatic, which I would have been okay with that. But instead of doing that, I think Lulu Wang chose to do the moment where she lets Awkwafina, Billy, recognize her mother's having a breakdown, but never calls it into attention because she knows, Billy knows how her mother will react. Mm-hmm. So she knows her mother has these emotions, but they don't come out because her mother has respect for the culture that she was raised in. Even though she's been in America for 30 plus years, or less than actually.
It was like 25 years, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. You said 6. She was 6. I thought it was 9 when they left, but I might be wrong.
Well, I think that Lulu Wang was 6, but I don't know when the character in the movie, Billy, I don't know when they left.
I think they said 9, but I'm not sure. And then you see that great moment in that cab ride home where you see the reminder of where the house that Billy remembers is now like this kind of Art Deco rainbow thing. And it's huge. It's over this big field. And it's a reminder that for everything that stays the same in this world, everything changes. And that the memory of that neighborhood is what's important. The way it made Billy feel as a child is what's important. Not that that house really exists anymore, because things change. But to have that moment, to have that security as a child reminds you that this culture was important to them then. It should be important to them now. I'm not trying to convince anybody. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying that it's interesting because both our perspectives are exactly what the film's doing. It's bouncing two different cultural perspectives back and forth. And like you said in the beginning of the podcast, that this is really about culture. And I just want to be what my parents raised me to be. And that is to have my own views, but to also say that's not necessarily what the man next door believes. So, let them believe it as long as they're not harming anybody or themselves. They have the right in America to believe whatever they want to believe. And so for me, I'm not saying I necessarily think they made the right choice. And I find it interesting that we spent the whole podcast talking about this one choice and not necessarily about the film in general. Like the technical parts, or we've talked about some of that
We
stuff
have.
and the performances. Yeah, but it's all been about this one question. And we've talked about this in the past, that it's just one great idea that can shape a whole movie. And I've read
Mhm.
a couple of reviews about how people think they've repeated themselves in the middle section of this movie. And I get that. And that how this movie is only about this one subject. It doesn't, the characters don't branch off. You don't learn anything new about the characters other than what you've already learned. I love that.
Mhm.
I think that makes this film even more brilliant, that we don't branch off into subplots and melodramatic and how the couple who's getting married got together. And we don't hear anything about that. It's about this one subject. So I find it intriguing that I can understand what I would think, but I can also understand what that character would think, because that's where that character's from. And I'm not saying I want to have dinner with these people who are lying to their grandmother, unless they're eating at that revolving table. Then I would go to dinner with them there,
Sure. Yeah.
or at the wedding with the crab. But I'm saying that if I was at a dinner and this discussion came up, I would sit back and let them talk their opinions, because that's
Mm.
how I was raised. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think we're ever going to answer that question.
Oh no, but yeah, it is an interesting thought experiment. Well, you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer, and you can tweet us at actorengineer. And we'll see you next time.